Well, here we start again. I believe this is the last lecture before you head out for your spring break. Have a good time, come back safely. So now between the spring break, I'm the only one in the middle, and now is this lecture. So I know how you must feel about it. I'm the hindrance, so I'll make it short and sweet, I hope. So you can get on the way to enjoy your spring break. If you ask me what am I going to do in the spring break, very likely I'll stay put and hold the fort. I'll stay in Austin. Somebody has to stay here to make sure everything is working fine in the city of Austin. So you come back, and so you'll find the city just the way you left it, thanks to me. Having said that, basically we covered 2, maybe 3 subjects last time, or last time meaning in the last lecture. One dealt with bonds. This is a good an hour or longer lecture, looking at different aspects of bonds. What is a bond? What is bond indenture? Par value, no par value, and so on. How do you retire or redeem a bond? Bond rating, bond rate, and how do you get paid, you being the bond holder? And there are 0 coupon bonds we talked about, and why certain kind of bonds might be favorable for one person, may not be favorable for another person, and why. And godly, I think we touched a lot of important subjects regarding bonds. I don't think there's anything lacking when we talk about bonds, and you now can go and teach the subject of bonds yourself. I've covered just about everything I know about bonds, okay? Then we talked about commercial paper. No, yeah, was it yesterday or the day before? But the big subject we talked about was leasing. No, I think we talked about commercial the time before, probably. There's so many things I teach, there's so many subjects. But anyway, yeah, I know we did talk about the commercial paper. Was it last time or the time before? Doesn't matter, you got it. But we talked also about trade credit. Now, and a good amount of time was spent late. It was the end of the lecture last time was leasing, which is no different from renting. And I said you can lease a big item as a jumbo jet, $300 million plus equipment, and rigs can be leased, and they are leased. The leasing companies, and many aircraft, when the airlines fly you on around the world, are leased from these 2 companies, or maybe 3 or 4 companies. There are not many leasing companies, but one I said was in Australia, one in California, and there might be a couple somewhere else, which I may not know about. So we talked about leasing, the benefits to the lessor, the owner, and the benefits to the lessee, the renter. And we looked at like 5 or 6 benefits to the lessee, 2 to the lessor. 100% financing. If you go to the bank, you have to put up 30-40% of your own money first, and if you don't have it, don't waste your time at the bank. They will not give you the money. They don't give money to poor people like me. And so that is enough that we discussed. Now we're going to move on to another subject, which you might find a little interesting today, a subject of World Bank and international multilateral lending agencies. Now, before I get into multilateral lending agencies, banks call it. Normally, I don't know why we call them agencies, they're banks. Okay. But they normally refer to multilateral lending agencies. But they also, that is multilateral, mean many nations, global. Then there are also bilateral lending agencies between 2 nations, 2, bi is 2. Let me clear this first because the shorter subject of bilateral, and then we move to multilateral lending agencies, and which will take much longer time, and talk with the World Bank and so on. The bilateral agencies, let's start there. Most, if not all, developed countries that basically are developed because they're industrialized countries, they manufacture a lot of stuff that developing countries buy. Developed countries all over Europe. I would put China in that category. And also North America would be Canada and the United States and Japan. These are developed countries, industrialized countries that export a lot of goods to overseas developing countries. So most of these developed countries have what they call export credit agencies. Export credit agencies, ECA, to help developing countries to buy their products from developed countries, buy the products of developed countries. So these export credit agencies are really there to help the developed countries so they can sell their products to the developing countries. So therefore, the developed countries are very happy to lend money to the developing countries so that they can buy the goods from the developed countries. How about that? In other words, this is money lent to the developing countries by the developed countries' banks. So the developing countries will now have money to buy goods that are exported by the developed countries of Italy and France and the United States and Japan. Let me give you one example, and it'll become very easy to understand what I'm saying. We also have what is called the ECA, Export Credit Agency in the United States, that China has it, Italy has it, France has it, Belgium has it, UK has it, Germany has it. We call it Export-Import Bank of the United States, big name, Export-Import Bank of the United States of America. It's a government bank. It is referred to mostly as X-M, EX-M, EX Export dash IM Import Bank, Exim Bank is an abbreviation for Export Bank, Export Import Bank. It's a US government bank. So now let me explain how it works. Very simple explanation and easy example, as I always do. Once it's done, the example will help you clarify everything I've said so far. The Exim Bank, which is US government bank, headquartered in Washington, DC, would gladly lend money to Nigerian or Egyptian, Malaysian airline. Why would our US bank happily lend money to Egyptian airline? No problem. They would love to help the Egyptian airline in this example to buy aircraft so they can fly them around the world. But there's only one condition that is placed on Egypt Air, which is the airline of Egypt, to get the money from US Exim Bank. Only one condition, that if they want to buy an aircraft, Exim Bank will only lend money to Egypt Air if that aircraft is manufactured in the United States. That's the only condition. They have to buy an aircraft, let us say, from Boeing, which is an American company. With that money, they will borrow for that they get from the exit. They cannot, will not, shall not be allowed to borrow to buy from a European consortium called Airbus. So that's the origin. Now, I have no problem with that. Why do the American bank put that condition? Well, obviously, there's no secret. If they're buying the aircraft that is manufactured in the United States, who will get employed? The people over in the United States, the aeronautical engineers. Helps our employment, no problem. So in order to do good business, both sides have to benefit. What is the benefit to Egypt here? Because now they get an aircraft that they can use and fly. Win-win for both. I have no problem with that. But if they don't want to buy a Boeing, that's okay. They can go to Airbus in Europe and buy there. No problem. So this is an example of export credit agencies. It doesn't have to be aircraft. It could be anything, air conditioners manufactured in Italy or refrigerators manufactured in Germany. All these are industrial goods that are manufactured by the developed countries. And they want to help the developing countries buy the exports by lending it to money to the developing countries. How simple can I make it? This is an example of a bilateral too. Egypt country and USA, Nigerian Air and USA, the two, Malaysian Air and USA. Now, if we broaden the subject, there are also called multilateral lending agencies where there is more than two involved. The most common one is referred to as the World Bank. The World Bank. Most people in the United States don't know much about it, but if you're coming from the so-called developing countries of Africa or South America or Southeast Asia, very likely that you have heard about the World Bank. Now, let me go, this might be about a 30-minute talk only about the World Bank, so don't worry, it's very slowly and moving into the area that you need to learn and explaining everything as we go. The World Bank is headquartered in Washington, D.C. It is not that big a bank. It sounds World Bank. What is big? For example, I served at Barclays Bank 40 years ago, and we had 100,000 employees in Barclays. The World Bank at that time had about 6,000 employees, all in one building or two buildings in Washington, D.C. But they have offices in other countries also, but there are some, they're regional offices. The main headquarters, maybe one or two buildings, that's all. This might interest you. Anybody sitting in this class listening to me is welcome to get job in the World Bank. You know the banker, the young men and young women like you, they hire all the time. They have a young professionals program. They used to be called the young professional program. I think at that time, the age limit was 31 years or less. So you can go and Google World Bank Group. It's called World Bank Group. You see human resources or retail or whatever, submit the application. And if you're an engineer or a geologist or education expert or agricultural expert or pharmacist, no problem. All these kind of backgrounds are employed at the World Bank. They do not mind getting, there are lots of petroleum engineers and geologists and geophysicists working at the World Bank. So they welcome certain they prefer if you have another language other than English, but that's not mandatory. I think they would like to see if there are a little more female applicants, because there's a little shortage on their total number of employees made up of the ladies. They may give a little preference there, and I don't see any problem with that either. So don't rule out if you're a young man, and that my chances will be less now. And, I happen to have visited the bank long ago, and when I went to the cafeteria, it was like the United Nations. I could see people from all over the world, having lunch. Especially if you're from a very, very remote country that not many people have heard about, your chances improve because they want the bank to represent some of the very remote nations also. If they're not there enough in number, you have a better chance. But that, and if you say, well, Dr. Malik, give me the address, I don't know, you can Google, everything is in Google. But I go back a few years, of course, and the address physically is 1818 H as in Henry, H Street, 1818 H Street, end of Washington, D.C., 20433. That's all. How many professors have you come across who would even give you the address and possibly where you can get a job? Okay, now if you don't get a job, just don't blame me. I've already let you into the secret of how you can get a job here. Let's go back to the World Bank now. The World Bank group, the president of the group, I keep saying group because most people do not understand. The World Bank is a group made up of many divisions or many sub-banks. The president of the World Bank Group headquarters is always an American citizen. Always. And the organizational structure, I'll show you in a minute, is very straightforward, like any company's organization. Only the requirement is the man at the top is American. Everybody else doesn't have to be American. And in fact, the Americans are overrepresented. They rather have other people serving there. So the legal people, the human resources people, all these engineers, geologists, they're not American. They're very from many nations in the past. The reason I said that the World Bank Group is to emphasize the word group, because the World Bank Group is made up of many parts. And let me give you an idea. What are they? First and the biggest part is called, it's a subsidiary of the bank. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of the bank. It's a bank. It's a part, I said subsidiaries are also corporation. This case happens with the bank. Is called, that's the biggest, like 90% of the bank's functions are in this particular subsidiary called IBRD. IBRD. What does it stand for? International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Let me put on here, IBRD. Okay. So the big part is IBRD. The IBRD is divided. It used to be, I don't know, they keep changing the organization all the time. I don't know what companies, they love to change everything every 6 months. Why, I don't know. And similarly, regionally, geographically, they used to have several subsidiaries or groups or divisions in the IBRD. One I used to be called EMENA, maybe still is, EMENA, you can see on the extreme left-hand side. Europe, the countries in Europe, Middle East and North Africa, they would fit there. Next I say North America, NA. Next is Southeast Asia, would be Philippines and Indonesia and Malaysia and Cambodia and Bangladesh. Burma now called Myanmar, Latin America, and so on. So these are regional. Okay. So let's say in the first group, EMENA, Europe, Middle East, they will have then subgroups of countries. No, they might have a group of Egypt with Tunisia and Libya with Morocco, and Middle East might be Iraq with Iran and so on. And then if you want a law, if the government of Egypt wants a loan, they go to the EMENA group, okay, and they ask for a loan from that group, EMENA, Europe, Middle East group, or division. And then the EMENA would have engineers, and if they're making want to put a cement plant, they may have engineers who know good with cement, mechanical engineers maybe. They need gypsum. You may have a geologist to know where is the deposit of gypsum, because that's what you need, the gypsum for cement, okay, and so on, and limestone. And they'll assemble the team, go to Cairo and talk the details. So this is really the heart, the crux of the World Bank Group resides in the IBRD. And as a matter of fact, most people do not even know, when they talk about IBRD, they're talking about the World Bank, and if they talk about the World Bank, they never heard of the IBRD. So in other words, the word World Bank is normally what happens in the IBRD, but they don't know there is a thing called IBRD. They say the World Bank Group, World Bank, but really they're talking about the IBRD because there are other parts of the bank also. They never heard about it. So the most world is the same. IBRD and the World Bank mean the same thing. That's where most of the work gets done anyway. There's another group which, let me say, all IBRD loans, this is important. All loans given to the government, they only give it to the government. Most loans from the IBRD, most of them, or I think rather all of them, have a government guarantee. Read that. Important points. I may come back and discuss them in more detail. They have a government guarantee, meaning that if the project goes bad and they lend money to Egypt, they don't lend money to Egypt. If they lend money for a dam in Egypt called the Aswan Dam, ASWAN. It's a very old dam. It's been built out at the time of General Nasser there, or before, I don't know, long ago, 50 years, 60, 70 years ago. If the dam goes bad, government guarantees means The government of Egypt will pay the loan back no matter what, even if they have to increase the taxes on the people of Egypt. Important point. Later we'll get into some discussion why did I say this is an important point. Now, another agency that is also included in the World Bank group, which is a relatively small agency, is called IFC. Write it down. IFC is a part of the World Bank group. Like IBRD is a part of the World Bank. It stands for International Finance Corporation. IFC stands for International Finance Corporation. Let's write it down. Write the three words which I'm going to talk about. To mobilize, mobilize meaning to move domestic capital. The word domestic is also important, capital. Let's explain all that. The IFC stands for International Finance Corporation. It's relatively small. I believe, I could be corrected, it was started in 1956. It's part of the World Bank Group. Their offices are at the same place as 1818 H Street. You can get a job with them also. You can go to the IFC and get loan also, but they're very small. Personally, first question, what do you mean by mobilize domestic capital? That is the mandate. That is the objective of the IFC, is to mobilize domestic capital. Excuse me. Let me digress a little bit into my conversation. Let me get some water, please. The objective of the IFC is to mobilize Which capital? Domestic capital. Now, so what do you mean by domestic capital? As I said before I got up to get a glass of water, is that wonder why are, it's only my thought now, very personal thought, digressing from the main subject, which will make you understand a little more than finance. My thoughts only. Don't mean that I'm right or wrong, it's my opinion. Why are developing countries developing countries? Why are countries poor and some countries are rich? Have you ever wondered about it? If you have not, you should. I always wondered about it. Did God make them poor countries? No, heaven's sake, no. If I say my God is loving and caring and all the good things that we can think about God, how can I say then certain countries he made over poor? What kind of a God is that? And I'm a very religious person, don't understand me. And I've written on this subject. I have actually written on the subject. The good God does not make poor and rich. And I like to believe God is good. I'm not saying you should believe in God or not. That's a very personal decision. I'm not trying to convert anything to any religion whatsoever. I'm giving you just it's a philosophical question. Which is the most lucky continent? I would call it Africa. I've been all over Africa. Recently, I was in South Africa. Before, I was in Nigeria. I used to go every year into Egypt, from north to the south. No. God is good. They've got every resource you can imagine in the African continent. Every resource. Natural resources. They've got oil. Countries that exporting, you know, and I have lectured in this country. Physically, I've been there. In fact, the Minister of Oil has come here to listen to me 2 times to Austin, Texas. Then he said, come down to my country and I'll give you the name, which you've never heard before. In fact, I got an invitation from the president. They said, please, we want to discuss something. And I'm sorry, I'm a little busy these days. I could not. I've been to the country, but at that time I couldn't meet him because I had other meetings lined up. You never heard of it. It's called Equatorial Guinea, only as an example. And as I said, I hold a conference here for 3 weeks. 3 weeks every year for 20 years. I've had people come in April. April is a good time of the year, all over the world to listen to me for 3 weeks, every day, 8 hours a day. And not a single year has passed. Every year that all minister of that country sends a large delegation to Austin, Texas every year to listen to me, and they stay at the Renaissance Hotel in the Arboretum, and in the nice fancy auditorium where I lecture. Why do I have to talk about not what I lecture? People never heard. Why are these countries poor? Well, they got lots of oil, lots of gas. Apart from that, the soil in African country is wonderful. You know the soil. I jokingly say you put you put a stick in the ground, out comes bananas. I jokingly say that. That's how soil is fertile. The climate is all kinds of climate. You know, very cold. You can grow anything. You got all kinds of resources. You've got special resources. When you were in high school, you remember you learned, what do they call that table? There used to be a table, I never remembered it, I still don't. Chemistry table, it had, I forget the name of the table. If you go to the Wagner Hall, chemistry department, and there is a big auditorium, that's where the table all plastered in the big wall. Let's come to my mind and say, where they have a list of all molybdenum, uranium, all kinds of funny names, molybdenum, all these funny names you might come back to you, that are part of the table. I can only think of molybdenum and uranium and other. They mostly ended up with IUM. I don't know why. We have all, these are strategic minerals. Countries would love to have those. They're used for manufacturing military aircraft, lithium and all the good stuff that goes into batteries. Everybody wants to have an electric vehicle. It needs battery. So the point is, God has given them everything. They're not very rich country, we know that. So what happened? There is all that. That comes into the question. On the other hand, we have Japan. Japan. Nothing. Zero. I've been to Japan also, by the way. Nothing. Bunch of islands thrown into the ocean. No agricultural land because of the little islands, they go right into the sea. No flat land, mountains into the sea. These islands are not connected. There's no land mass to speak about. And on top of it, they're shaking all the time. Earthquakes. No oil, no gas, no coal. At one time, with the biggest shipbuilder, before China rose to be what it is today. At that time, I was in banking, into the early 80s. And I used to lecture to Japanese banks. And I realized that at that time, if you take three of the largest American banks at that time, listen carefully, largest American banks were Bank of America, Chase Manhattan Bank, and Citibank. These are the three largest American banks in the early. If you take the assets of the three largest banks in America at that time, they were less than the asset of one Japanese bank. One Japanese bank was bigger than the three largest American banks. And together, they rose to the top. At that time, the bank's name you cannot even pronounce. It's Daiichi Kangyo. It's not now as big as the other banks have come up. God, for heaven's sake. Look at all the fancy cars they make. All kinds of Lexus and Mazdas and Subarus and Hondas and Toyotas. Golly. The movement went right to the top. Electronics. Sony, the best TV you can afford, if you can buy it, and if you can afford it, it's Sony. So the point is, you went to the top out of nothing. And guess what? Out of the two, these shaky islands got, they didn't get anything the Almighty, did he? Not one, but twice. We, as human beings, or human society, we threw 2 atom bombs on that country, and yet they rose to have the biggest bank and the biggest car, the biggest, out of nothing. So what's the point? Did God make them rich or poor? No. So now I come back to the subject why we are here. These are personal opinions only. It does not mean you have to believe anything I'm saying. This is not a question I'm going to ask in the exam. I'll tell you why our country is poor. That is not why I'm here. But just to open your mind. We have to, as teachers, our job is also helping to put some questions in your mind. I always say a good teacher, half his job is to answer your questions. But half his job is what? To put more questions in your mind than you have to begin with. So that you know your work begins, that the answers he could not tell you, but he could put the question. Now you have to go keep on searching. That's what searching and researching is. Find the answer to the question I'm putting in your mind. Don't worry to find exam that why nation for it. I'll tell you now why I think. I've said God is kind and loving, he treats everybody the same. And look, Japan out of nowhere got to be at the top. Can be some of them, all the things they should be happy about, they're not doing too much. Because of what I wrote, mobilize domestic capital. If you're coming from a developing country, then I'm looking at the name that I called out last time. And I could tell from the name, many of the names in the roster were from developing countries. Now, why am I talking about that? In all developing countries, no exception in my mind. There is a few, very few, 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, super rich people. They suck the wealth of the nation. Every developing country has 20, 100, 200 people. Tens of millions of people, population of the country, but only maybe 500 have all the wealth, 90% of the wealth. Put it into their bank accounts. Then what? What do they do with that wealth? So much hamburgers you buy, you can buy a thick steak. How many steaks are you going to eat? So they take that wealth out of the country. Some bank accounts, maybe in Switzerland, somewhere, I don't know. I don't have bank accounts. Put the money. What's the problem? They take it out of the country and put it in the bank wherever they are, outside the country. I'm just naming the country. I don't know. If I take the blood out of your body, no blood, what happens to you? You're dead. D-E-A-D, simple. You don't have to be a medical doctor to ask that. Take the blood out of the vein, you are dead. And I am dead also. No question about it. Same thing. You take the capital, the money, out of the country and put it outside in another bank in Switzerland, someplace. That is the blood that the economy needs. The money, the capital is the blood of the economy of the country. So what have they done? Like the blood comes out of the body, you're dead. The money goes out of the country overseas. The economy is dead. There's no growth. There's no unemployment. Now you decide who made them poor throughout the country. You have to have that blood, the wealth circulated for the benefit of the masses, everybody in the country. This is where it's all going on. Now, having said that, so this is what IFC, what they say. I like them for this reason. They said domestic capital, the one money that rich people that you have not sent to overseas, you put it in the pillow in the bedroom. Because you don't want to show it to the government, they'll tax you. So you have a pillow in the bedroom, you put the money there, if that doesn't go out of the country and you sleep on it, maybe you can sleep better that way. I don't know. I sleep better when I was clear. Only one way I can sleep better, believe me. There's no better way to sleep than to have a clear conscience. That slumber beats any amount of wealth under your pillow. But trust me. And try it sometimes. It's perfect sleep. Now the point is what? I know I have digressed. No, it's not the finance that you were expecting. That's okay. That's okay. At least I opened you to some thinking. Not right or wrong, a different thinking. That's my job. No, I don't think it's a job. I don't take it as a job, as a mission to young men and young women. Now I'm going to the nuts and bolts of IFC. Now back to the IFC. IFC, as I said more than once, is a relatively small organization, a little bit of capital. So they will go to maybe, let's say, Egypt. If you're an Egyptian in the class, please don't take it personally. I can't take, or maybe I'll take it out because you might say, oh, come on, no, don't talk about it. Oh, I don't think I have a student here from Rwanda, but Rwanda is a country. So I'm saying it's safe. So IFC goes to Rwanda, a country in Africa, and hires a local consultant and says, Mr. Consultant, here is $5 million. I'm telling you how it works. IFC works. And we want you to go around Rwanda and look for good projects there. And come back after 6 months and tell us if you found a good project. The consultant comes back after 6 months and say, yeah, Mr. IFC, I found an interesting project. You know why? Because I saw a deposit of limestone sitting here next to a deposit of gypsum sitting here. Do you know what happened now? You need limestone and gypsum to make cement. So therefore, Mr. IFC, we think we can have a project to manufacture cement. Hey, good idea. So now what do they do? What does IFC do? And they collect the rich people, not poor people like me, rich people like you. They get them into some fancy hotel in Rwanda and say, look, Mr. Rich People, we have a project which you might be interested in. So here is the gypsum, here is the limestone, we can manufacture cement. And so please join us. We are going to put 10% of IFC money as equity. We like it so much. Why did you come and chip in 80 to 90% of your money? Take it out of the below, domestic, your money, domestic, and put it in the project. And if they're convincing enough, so these folks who've got money and don't know what to do with it, so rich, oh, good. So they take the domestic money, domestic capital, to put in the project. So the IFC was helps mobilize, move the capital from the bedroom into the economy of the country. How what a great idea. I like it even more because unlike the IBRD, the IFC projects do not have a government guarantee. If the project doesn't work in IFC case, they lose the money also, IFC loses it. But in case of IBRD, the project goes bad, the government loses the money no matter what. And how does the government make up the money? To pay back the World Bank or the IB? One way to raise taxes. So the government is putting the burden of returning the money on the poor people of that country that lent money to the IBRD. So therefore, you can see why I'm a little favorably disposed toward the IFC, because there's no government guarantee and they're willing to take the risk themselves. They're very small. Let's take on the third part of the World Bank group. Let me write it down. The third, this is all under the World Bank group, which is multilateral lending agencies. MIGA stands for multilateral, one word. Investment guarantee. Agency. MIGA stands for Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. At one time, I think when it started, MIGA, the head of MIGA was an Egyptian, I believe. Let me simplify what is MIGA. MIGA is no different from an insurance company. That's all. MIGA is exactly an insurance company with a fancy name. How does the insurance company work? Very simple. They charge you a premium. Every year you send them a premium. For every $100,000 of insurance, you send them a premium, like you send them the premium for your car insurance. So if something bad happens to your car, they'll reimburse you, pay you. Same thing if something bad happens in Rwanda, who's you? I'll tell you in a minute who are you. They'll compensate you, MIGA. When you insure your car, you pay them a premium every 6 months, every year. Same thing. MIGA will also charge the company a premium, depending on the amount of the insurance, of course. And the risk involved. Now let me start with a little storytelling background. Corporations have to look at many things before they go to another country outside of America, if it's an American company, or outside of Bangladesh, if it's a Bangladeshi, or outside of India, if it's an Indian company. So all the risks that are inherent for an American company in America, or Indian company in India, or Bangladeshi company in Bangladesh, those risks are still inherent when they go overseas. Plus, when they go overseas, there are additional risks by going outside of America, outside of India. Now, what are the additional risks? I'll give you some examples. It is for those additional risks that the insurance company called MIGA, they say, okay, we will insure your damages if you're faced with those risks and compensate you accordingly. Example. So what happens is, the companies don't like to go overseas because, they're afraid of the risk. So MIGA says, don't be afraid, we'll take care of you. Go over there and work there. Don't worry, we'll help you if there's a problem with through MIGA. So what are the problems? Number one, currency transfer. Number one, risk. With the companies in America, there's no currency transfer. American dollar is American dollar. Whether you have it in San Antonio, you have it in New York. But if you're in Peru, and they limit you to how much foreign exchange you can take out, you can't transfer more than that. So what good is your Peruvian intis or soul now, intis in the past? We'll talk about that later on. What's the difference between soul and inti? They're limited, so you can't take your money out in dollars. So because don't worry, we'll help you. We'll let you take your money out in dollars. That's one. Currency transfer. Another could be expropriation. I'll say it and then I'll spell it. Expropriation. P-R-O, propriation. P-R-I-A-T-I-O-N. Expropriation. And let me do it again. Expropriate, E-X-Pro, P-R-O, P-R-I-A-T-I-O-N, expropriation, the risk. It's same as nationalization. No, in America, if you're an American company, Exxon, and working in America, there's no question nationalize. Who are they going to nationalize? You don't nationalize. UK doesn't nationalize. France doesn't. If you go into some remote country over, who knows, in Africa, they may nationalize you. Get out of here. So MEGA will help you get the compensation if somebody nationalizes you. So currency transfer, one, expropriation. Another could be, not that it happens, could be breach of contract. Breach, B-R-E-A-C-H, breach of contract. Again, government of Peru may say, no, this is not what we think is the contract. Get out. We don't like it. The government. They do what they want to do. Sorry if you're Peruvian, I'm just using it as an example. Not living up to the contract, not meeting the, fulfilling the contractual terms. Again, civil disturbance. Your company could be caught in some civil disturbance. There could be some problem within groups in the country and they may burn your offices. Happens all the time. I've been in countries where US government had nothing to do with it, but they burned down the US offices of companies, the US. No, we've got nothing to do with this. Oh, well, no, you're American, down with American, down with, no, okay, burn it out. There's a mob mentality. Nobody thinks about it at that time. So all these are, I'm giving you at least 3-4 examples of what are the risks of going outside of America or Bangladesh, or outside of India, wherever you are from. So MEGA will take over and help you get the money back, or some part of it. Another part of the IFC besides MEGA is IDA. IDA. Stands for International Development Association. International Development Association is IDA. What does that mean? IDA is not just an organization, it's like an association of rich countries. Like they give money more like a grant on long-term 50-year loan at 0.5% interest rate. Oh, very small, 50-year loan, 0.5%. Only to help out. If there's an earthquake in Haiti or there's some floods over in some part of the world, it's a very poor country, or there's hurricane somewhere in the Southeast Asian country of East Timor. By the way, East Timor is a country which is part of Indonesia before. Now, then a group of rich countries, oh, come on, let's give them $50 million and as a loan, but after a few years, they just write them off. International Development Association. Last part of the group of World Bank is called, it's got a fancy name, I just make it up, something like that. International Center for the Settlement of Commercial Dispute. Let's write it on. International Center That's it. The fifth and the last one is ICSCD or something like that. It's made up of these alphabets. And I'm pretty close, if not right, close enough. International Center for the Settlement of Commercial Disputes. Only commercial, not political, not geopolitical disputes, not territorial disputes. And we'll talk about those too. No, not in this class. The other class, we'll talk about territorial disputes between countries. You'll be very surprised, shocked. Most people know about it. There's a territorial dispute between Kuwait and, I can hear you shouting, in Iraq. Every child knows that. But I didn't hear you say something in this here or this here, the other one. There's been a territorial dispute between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. Now there's some Saudi students here. They must know that. We'll talk about that, but not in this class. That's a part of the contractual class. And the Saudis and the Arabs have settled it beautifully, very calmly, very beautifully. They've been there for 45 years. And they've handled it marvelously. So in the other class, I talk about this. Those are contractual classes. What if the oil field is in two countries, half a field in this, half field in that country, on the border in the middle? Who gets the oil and how do you divide it? That's one of the problems Iraq had with Kuwait. Iraqi said, look here, there's a very, very big field. It's called the South Rumaila Field, R-U-M-A-I-L-A, Rumaila Field. It's at the border between Kuwait, half it is in Kuwait in the north, half it is in Iraq in the south. And Saddam said, look here, fellow Kuwaiti, you don't listen to me. I keep telling you, don't do directional drilling on the north of the borderline with Iraq, Kuwaitis, in the South Rumaila field. So you drill on the north, across the border, the Kuwait, and you do directional drilling and sucking the oil out from Iraq because, directional drilling. You're on this side of the border, I'm on this side, but you're right next to the borderline and you take all out of Iraq. I'm going to kill you. No, this is no reason to kill anybody. That field is now being operated by British BP. So this thing, ICSID, is to settle not territorial disputes, but commercial disputes. There was, I digress, as I said in my other class, we talked about disputes between nations on the territory. Between just about 90% or more countries in the world, almost all, let's say, have problems with the neighbors. Part of the reason is technology is causing that problem, and I get into why technology is causing the problem. I think I may have mentioned early on, probably did, in my list of the changes in the oil business, the technology, and then I think I may have talked about UK and Norway. Now, that's not part of this course, but that I just wanted to highlight some of the things that are happening today, that you can drill in 11,000 feet of water, and the technology helps do it. So there's a problem with UK and how did they settle it? And so there's a problem with Nigeria and Cameroon and Venezuela and the country next, all over the world, but Australia and East Timor. Wherever we go, these are territorial disputes with Thailand and Malaysia. And I go into discussion of that in the territorial context. I wish you would take it as a fun course, okay? But for that, we go around the world. We go to Colombia and Norway and Indonesia, and what are the salient features of this and that. Now it's fun, okay? And I know there's nobody teaching it because for many reasons, we'll discuss it if you were in that class. So here we have 5 different groups, 5 different divisions of parts or the subsidiary of the World Bank Group. Getting money from the World Bank Group presents some advantages. One is most commercial banks may lend you money for a few years, 5, 4, 5, 6 years. You meaning the country. Whereas in case of IFC, they may lend money for the project also, project related, directly secured by the project. But this guy over what are these people? IBRD, that's with the government. So, as I said, the government guarantees. They're long-term loans. So you're going to put a dam or a railroad or a road itself, a big refinery, you have to have a long-term. The interest rates in the IBRD case are slightly less than the commercial banks. Slightly, not much, slightly. And some say when somebody, there's a consortium, other banks want to jump in when the project, and they see the World Bank is in the project, they kind of feel like, oh, they have developed some confidence. The World Bank is it's good for them, it's good for us. Kind of, I don't know, that's worth talking about, but still there's something that, oh, the World Bank is in it, must be a good project, so let's risk, or let's jump in. But take it for the third one, whatever it's worth, okay? I'll just throw it in. Okay, boy, am I tired and non-stop, on and on and on and on and on. And now you must be tired too. So I'm not going to let you go home yet. Take your 12 minutes break, because it's a good place to start on my watch. I can remember that. And then I'll take you to the end of the time. And then we'll go home. Anyway, 12 minutes, be back. The screen will continue to show. नहीं नहीं Well, I'm back. I hope you're back also. I thought of just giving you some references here. Actually, I synthesize, I summarize, I pull together from many chapters in the book and just tell you essentially what you need. But if you want to go in more detail on some subject, you say, well, Dr. Malik, where can I get more about the World Bank Group and so on? Well, that's in the book. You purchase the book, and the one you purchased from the print shop at the university, the reference number 32, that's towards the end of the book. The chapter says World Bank Group Financing, 32. And the 33 chapter, number last, next to the last, is International Finance Corporation. Okay, you can get more stuff there. And then there's something about commercial paper on chapter number 31. And it says an innovative source of financing for mining projects. I just gave you a little short summary of what is a commercial paper. But if you want to really know the details and you say, I want to become expert on it, then page 31 will, chapter 31 will help you there. Okay. I'm just checking something. Yeah, there is some good stuff on IFC. Yeah. Okay. Now you're on your own. You know where to get more stuff in case you need it. Okay. So before we took the break, I was talking about the World Bank Group, an example of a multilateral lending agency. Similar to the World Bank Group, our Regional Development Bank, International Bank for Regional Development, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. There are similar development banks, and you wonder, well, why do we have these banks giving money? This coming from rich country to the poor countries. Is it strictly because they love the poor people? No, nobody loves the poor. Come on, no. Unless you're really a saint, I don't mean to imply that there's no mission. My father was a missionary. I should not say that. Yeah, those people are unique, unique not like my father. They do it for the love of humanity. But most lowly souls like we always look for some benefit for ourselves. That's human nature. The more we conquer the selfishness in human nature, the higher we rise as a human being, as a human person. Remember that. The more to rise as a human being, the more we look at less for where we have to benefit from everything, okay? That's the missionary zeal, like he was talking about maybe yesterday in some other class, okay? I always say that, never mind, we'll talk about that some other time, about the missionary versus a job versus a missionary. I may have said it before. I never look at what I'm doing now as a job. I look at it as my mission in life. Nobody who's a teacher should be looking at it as a job. Teaching is much higher than a job. It's a mission. And let's get to the subject of finance. As I said, when I started, that like similar to the IBRD and so on, there are geographical regional. When I say development banks, I'll give you some names, you can take note of them. And most of you come from one region or the other. There's one called the African Development Bank. African Development Bank for African nations. You can go to the World Bank, they have a group that deals with African nations to help them. The reason we have rich countries helping develop the countries that are poor is because we raise the standard of countries that are relatively poor. They want an air-conditioned room or a refrigerator with cold water. Where are they going to buy it from? The developed countries. So by helping them, they get the cold water, the developed country get the employment and industry develop, nothing wrong. It's a give and take. I'm not saying anything wrong with that arrangement. The African Development Bank is for countries in Africa, obviously, similar to the World Bank, IBID, particularly how they are structured and how they lend out to African countries only. And their headquarters is not in Washington, it is permanently in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. If you're French, I don't know French, it might be Yvonne or something like that. Yeah, how is that my French for Ivory Coast? I've tried to reveal my expertise in French. Okay, I call it Ivory Coast, simply the Abidjan. Abidjan, Abidjan is the capital. However, for a while, they temporarily moved the bank headquarters to, where did they go? To Tunis. Tunis in Tunisia, capital of Tunisia is a country called Tunis, T-U-N-I-C. Oh, no. T-U-N-I-S, forgive me, please. They may have moved back to Ivory Coast, I don't know, okay? But I do know that the permanent headquarters was, probably still is, the Abidjan, capital of Ivory Coast. For African countries, you say, what about we folks in Latin America, South America? There is a regional development bank for South American countries, similar to the World Bank. Like, it's called IADB. IADB stands for International Bank. International Bank. No, I take it back. No. What is IB? No. No, take it back. IADB, I'm sorry. IADB is Bank for Latin American, South American countries. IADB stands for Inter-American Development Bank. IADB, Inter-American Development Bank. The headquarters is located in Washington, D.C. There is also a regional bank for the Asian countries. Which countries might that be? Indonesia, Mongolia, Burma, Myanmar now, Cambodia. You probably haven't heard the next is Laos, Laos, Vietnam, India, mostly Southeast Asian countries, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Mostly Southeast Asian country. It's called the Asian Development Bank. Headquarter, let's see, you guess it. Are you ready? Manila, Philippines. There is another development bank, regional. It is called the European, it's called E as in elephant, B boy, R Robert, D David. EBRD. European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Got the EBRD is European Bank for Reconstruction Development, and the headquarters is located in London. Which countries might they help? This bank lends to countries which were under the former East European regime. You know, East European, so-called behind the Iron Curtain. Now we have no East and West. There is no Iron Curtain. Countries like Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and others. So these countries can get funding, loans from the European Bank for Reconstruction Development. They can still go to the World Bank. There's no stopping going to the World Bank. Okay. Now you should be well informed about the World Bank Group. There is a sister organization, I don't know, sister or cousin or brother, I can't tell if it's a brother or sister, similar to the World Bank Group, but has a different function. This organization that I'm going to talk about is called, and you may have heard about it, very likelihood that you have, called the International Monetary Fund. Let me write it down. The International Monetary Fund, as I said, is similar, but maybe a cousin or something like that. You can call it what you will. To the World Bank Group, its headquarters is in Washington, D.C. Whereas the president of the World Bank Group has always been an American citizen, and so far, at least so far, the practice has been the managing director of the IMF, International Monetary Fund, has been a European. That's how they balance it. Has been a European so far. I wonder why they call it managing director of case of European guy there in IMF and president here in, I don't know. Other than to make up a nice, interesting observation, could be wrong. Generally, when we talk with the head of an organization in the United States, it is generally referred to as the president. However, while in Europe, the same rank, the same position, not always, but generally, is referred to as a managing director. I can't think of any other reason. If you come up with one, I'll be mighty pleased to hear your answer to that. Headquarter, Washington. The function of the World Bank Group, I said, is what? In case of IBRD, is to help developing countries build up their infrastructure. With a government guarantee. That is not the function of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. The function of the IMF is this, that when countries have a balance of trade problem, balance of payments problem, as example, I'll tell you what that means. And the currency is coming down in value to other currencies, and they have serious problems. That is when the IMF steps in to help the countries in distress and problem. Okay, balance of payment problem, balance of trade problem, losing value of currency problem, they're all tied together. Give you an example. What does balance of payment problem mean? Very simple. Balance of payment, you pay for what you buy, as simple as that. It's very simple. Countries where the imports You pay with foreign hard currency. You don't pay with local currency, which in developing countries is useless anyway, overseas. You pay in dollars and euros and yen and guilders we don't have, and kroners and all that, kroner Norwegian. If the country has too much import bill and too little export bill, that means they're earning very little foreign exchange in dollars, but have a bill that is requiring payment in a large amount in dollars for their imports, and they're exporting very little. So there are not many dollars that they're getting from the export, but importing a lot, they have to give out a lot in terms of dollars, because that causes problem in balance of payment. And therefore, what happens? Nobody wants a currency outside the country, and inside it has inflationary problems. So the value of the currency begins to drop significantly. That is when the IMF steps in. Under those circumstances, the IMF will step in and help bring in infusion, step in, infuse, add, give a loan in hard currency to the country with the problem of balance of payment to help them stabilize the currency. And once the currency is stabilized, then they will pay back the loan with interest to the IMF. I'll give you an example, a real example. This occurred I know of in 3 countries about the same time, 10, 15 years back. Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, all in Southeast Asia. These countries, 3 in South, had serious balance of payment problem. Number 1, the currency in Indonesia is called a rupee, R-U-P-E-E. The currency in Thailand is called a baht. I think it's baht, B-H-A-T. Baht. The currency in Malaysia is called ringgit, R-I-N-G-I-T. These 3 currencies in these 3 countries were having a lot of problems. They were losing value. So that's when the IMF came in with a team of its own specialists, infused, lent these countries hard currency to help them make the payment, and therefore the value of the currency stabilized. And once it is stabilized, they were able to return the money to the countries, or to the IMF, sorry, to the IMF. So here we have the IMF having a separate and different function from the monetary fund and from the World Bank. Okay. Let's see what other multilateral can I think about. In the last, I'm just adding it now, just the last 5 to 7, 6, 5 years or so, there are 1 or 2 other groups have come together to form their own banks. One is with China in BRIC. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, BRICS. These are the countries called themselves BRICS now. Brazil, the R is for Russia, I is India, sees China and sees South Africa. So they're developing some kind of a grouping where they can help them in funding. Now China wants to come up with another, mostly funded by them, bank called AIB, I think. Asian Investment Bank. Okay, that's China. And the first case, again, BRICS, China was there. I'm trying to, these are relatively new. Because these countries, particularly led by China, because they have a lot of foreign exchange. Feel, for example, these countries feel like in the World Bank group, they've been relegated to like second-class citizens. America is the controlling thing there. Then America is grouped with Britain, France, and Germany, and then they and Japan, and then they become super forceful. And so China, which has a lot of clout, unimaginable clout, and so why should we be subservient to these in the World Bank group? Why can't we create our own? Because we could the financial muscle to do it. And to say, what does that mean? We have, I don't know, a negative, how many is $20 trillion negative, I think. Yeah, I think so. I could correct myself. If I'm wrong, I'll do it. We have a deficit of about $20 trillion, I think, that we owe. Whereas China has a positive foreign exchange, positive in the pocket of $3 trillion. 3 multiplied by 10 to the power of 12 trillion dollars. They have money to spend. So that's why they're going around the world just buying up companies and lending countries money so that they can now, if you lend somebody, so the borrower has to depend on you. And this has become a very big problem globally. So they're lending to a lot of African countries, and even in the Sri Lanka case, they were lending. So now when they're saying, okay, give us some money back, and some of these are secured loans from China to the countries, and the countries are up to here in debt from China, this is what's happening now. And the countries cannot pay that back. And then what happens if China says, we'll take over this project in your country. So that is what is happening. It's got not a dead bird, it's got a fancy name, like do not be taken in by getting this, because one day they're going to own all of these things that you are in your country because you're not able to pay back the loan. Some countries, they given out loans left and right all over Africa. I have a map. When I teach this overseas, I have a map, just what in every African country, how much they're lending to these countries. And the same thing is true with Southeast Asian and Latin America. My goodness, $3 to $4 trillion is unimaginable. You have no idea what it is. So now they're spreading their wings and say, well, okay, if it's open competition, I've got no problem. If it's open and clear and clean, I have no problem with competition. Why should I? The competition is to try to beat the other side and do better. Yeah, competition brings the best out of people. If it's fair, for fair, even ground competition. So they're really in a very, for example, why would they have that trillions of dollars? Because they go down anywhere in Austin. If you find something that is not win in China, just give me a call. Even if it's in the middle of the night. I'm waiting for that call, will never happen. So I go to Europe a lot, everything. Give you an example that with that we'll end. You know, we talk about, GDP, and nobody has GDP. Let me give you just a simple example. It's where I read. To understand exports from China, it's for 8 ships that come out of China with stuff, Chinese stuff that is made in China for export, only 1 ship returns with imports into China. 7 go back empty to fill up again. I'm not saying this is good or bad for anybody. I'm just a lowly professor. I'm just making you familiar. As a teacher, my job is to make you familiar with what's around us. I'm not saying it's good for bad for this. If they can do it, we can do it. Why can't we? We meaning if the Western world. If we, whatever the reasons are, we can write books on all of that. But we must understand, as long as the competition fair is even ground, no problem, no problem. Let the best side win. I have no problem with that. How can I not? How can I be an impartial teacher if I said something? Having said that, I will certainly be an impartial grader when it comes to final exam. Don't be worried about it. It's going to be easy final exam. Don't sweat about it. Okay. Anyway, enjoy your spring break. I think that's the time now you're going to go and not listen to me till you come back after spring break. Be safe. We want you back. No extent. All your limbs in place. Plus no COVID. Leave COVID behind. Don't bring it back. Okay. Good luck to you. Have a good time and be safe. Best of wishes. Meeting for all the